Welcome to another episode of Life's Ambition Podcast. I wanted to apologize in advance for the cut out audio. The conversation starts with our guest getting his chemical engineering degree at North Carolina State. Without further ado, an emerging leader in sustainable packaging, Brad Barron.
Brad, how we doing? Yeah, what's new in life right now? Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah. Well, I know, you have a kid here. What were you doing in London? Huh, aerosols. How did that all start? Like what was the process behind that? Like how did you kind of get into it? Because, you hear a lot about when I was studying at school about the ozone layer and the importance of banning the CFCs and aerosols, which are chlorofluorocarbons. How did you get into that?
So I went to NC State, applied to NC State, and got accepted into the School of Chemical Engineering. So I decided I was going to be a chemical engineer. And I really didn't have much logic for why I wanted to be a chemical engineer. Like, I knew I wanted to do technical stuff. My mom had a friend who was a chemical engineer, and I was like, all right, sounds like a good career. I like chemistry. I'll try it. Then when I went to apply, they also then said, hey, there's this dual major you can do with paper making. So I said, all right, it's kind of interesting. They said, well, we'll give you a scholarship. I was like, hey, really interesting.
You're like, I'm sold.
So I went through my whole career, whole education, ended up getting 2 bachelor degrees. And, we can go back and talk about, details. But when I graduated, I knew one thing, and that's that I didn't want a chemical engineering job, and I didn't want a paper making job. Because,
Really?
well, yeah, I mean, those degrees, are largely serving industry. And I didn't want to work for an oil and gas company. I didn't want to work for a paper company. I had lots of great internships all over the world, great companies. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I got a job offer with Procter and Gamble to do packaging. And I had absolutely no idea what packaging was. But I said, well, they're a pretty good company, and I'm sure I'm going to go back to grad school in a year anyway. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'll work for P&G for a year and then go back to grad school and figure out what I'm going to do. And I ended up working there for 25 years in the world of packaging. Didn't go to grad school, and that led to the stuff that I do now with aerosols. So a very convoluted path to get where I ended up.
Oh yeah, how did you get an experience with Procter and Gamble? Because you hear a lot about, or it's very hard to get into the Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
With how big they are, you need to be a very competitive applicant. And I was wondering if you had a connection in that area, or you talked about how a lot of your internships were worldwide. Was a lot of that experience kind of what swayed them to go towards that direction, or?
I think so. So my internships were all in the paper industry, and they were all in R&D. I worked in an R&D center with Weyerhaeuser in Seattle. I worked with a Austrian paper company called Lenzing, and I worked for a Jujo paper company in Tokyo.
Holy cow!
And I had found, it was pretty cool. So, and I had secured all those internships through my professors. And their networks. NC State has one of the top paper science programs in the country.
Yeah.
That's what made me stand out. Like I said, I realized by doing that, I really didn't want to do the paper industry. But Chemie is a great degree. It's very competitive. I had a decent GPA. I can't remember what it was. It was a 3.8 or 3.9 or something like that. And
Studious.
in these international experiences. So they brought me in. P&G is really interesting about how they interview. Is they look for, because I recruited for P&G a lot while I was there. We look for people that have technical skills, but more importantly, they have strong raw material in terms of leadership and curiosity and technical astuteness and so forth. So I guess I had what it takes, and I ended up doing very well. I mean, I was there 25 years. So
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely awesome. When you were in college, you talked a lot about how you had different internships experiences. How important was it for you to take advantage of them? Like, would you recommend someone talking to their professors about research? And also, how open are professors about having others take on that kind of research?
So I think it's really important. I also had a fellowship with the National Science Foundation with one of the chemistry professors doing work on like semiconductor, like nano fabrication, cleaning, like went and worked on a synchrotron up in the Northeast and stuff like that. But
that's awesome.
I think it's critical it's critical for two reasons. Okay. One is great resume builders, of course. Okay. I had good internships starting my sophomore science and then throughout. But the other thing is that's how you figure out what you like. Like I said, I learned through my internships that I didn't want to be a research chemist, that I didn't want to work in the paper industry, that I didn't want to, like my national science one, that was like super cool. I mean, we were dealing with atom smashers, all this fancy equipment. And I learned when I got out that throughout all of this, one is I developed some good skills. I built my resume quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I also learned that what I wanted to do was applied research. And that's one of the things that led me to PNG, because I didn't want to do research. I didn't want to work a manufacturing job that didn't deal. But I also didn't want to play with test tubes and stuff like that in the lab. I wanted to do something that was closer to real life. And consumer products are like that. And what I found as I got into it, consumer products, you think, how difficult is it compared to developing a jet fighter or something like that? Well, jet fighters are pretty complex, but you make 20 of them. Like when I used to lead packaging for Tide. We made 450 million bottles of Tide every year.
Holy cow!
And the molds to make the plastic parts, you can imagine we had a lot of molds. Every part had to work with every single bottle, all the tolerances and all the variation, because if it didn't, the things would leak and people would hate it. And that's a different challenge, but that's technically just as challenging as what you would classically think of as a technical.
Yeah, and were you on the design aspect of Tide? So obviously we moved from liquid detergent more towards like the pod pieces. Were you helping design that process at all, or what did that look like?
So I wasn't there when it went from powders to liquids, but I did design all the packaging for Tide Pods. My group did. The way to think about packaging, at least as we defined it in PNG, is it's taking the pretty picture of what an artist says they want to do. So an industrial designer will say, hey, we want to create something that looks like this. And the packaging job is to figure out, how do I actually make that, in a way that it's not going to break, it's not going to leak, it's not wasteful, it's sustainable, it runs on our packing lines, but it also still looks as much as like that as possible, because whatever the artist wants it to be never works. But
and why do you say that?
Huh? Sorry.
Why do you say that it never works?
It'll have shapes that are impossible to mold, or would require you to have a very heavy part, which would be very expensive and not sustainable, or interfere with recycling, or might look pretty on a picture, but it doesn't have good ergonomics in the hand, so its usability isn't good, or it might fall over on your shelf. I mean, everybody has had the experience of buying something and the product experience being horrible because the packaging's bad. It leaks, it breaks, it's hard to open.
Yeah.
But everybody's also had the experience, and like the example I always use is like the box your iPhone comes to. Like you see that and like you touch it and you just know there's something really good inside. And that's not just because it doesn't break, but it's like the print's really good, the quality's good, So it kind of brings in psychology and engineering and material science and all of this kind of stuff. So that's what I liked about it. I found that in my career, I really like dealing with problems that aren't really well defined, that are, they're really challenging ones, but there's not really a roadmap of what to do and packaging.
Well, and you see nowadays where everyone is shifting more towards the sustainability route. Like Duke Energy for North Carolina is trying to be carbon neutral by 2050 on the grid. And that's going to be extremely hard, but they're hoping to get that done. And so for you, when you talk about the sustainability of just a product like a Tide Pod, like why is that more sustainable than, let's just say, the liquid detergent?
So I know a lot about this. So I used to lead sustainability for P&G packaging. So it's one of my personal passions. Not all the time. But the key with sustainability for packaging is pretty easy to define. It needs to be recyclable. So it needs to have a good end of life. So recycling or composting or reusing. And it needs to be made of materials that are not harmful to the planet. The challenge, though, is doing that in a way that you can afford as a company, but also that people like, because the reality is, like, there's people like myself that are very sustainability minded. The average American will not pay a penny more for something that's sustainable. You might say they will, but when it comes down to it, they won't. And so the challenge you have to set to yourself is, how do you achieve both of those? And Tide Pods is a great example. So Tide Pods, you probably don't realize this, but it's the most concentrated laundry detergent ever sold.
Really?
It's a dose. If you just think about the amount of liquid in a Tide Pod versus the amount of liquid you have to pour into a measuring cup, it's really small, right?
Yeah.
P&G had tried time and time before to get people to buy concentrated laundry detergent. They'd known about how to do that forever and ever, but every time P&G made a concentrated laundry detergent, a super concentrated detergent, people would look at it and say, wow, that bottle's like really small. I'm not getting a good value. And they wouldn't buy it. By moving to Tide Pods, which is a different product format. So instead of pouring out of a bottle, you've got this little thing that you toss in.
Yeah.
It helped consumers kind of break the mold in their mind and not look at it of, wow, that thing's really small. It's not a good value. Instead say, wow, that's really small. That's amazing. And because you could kind of count the number there, you knew how many loads you were getting, and it all worked out. So Tide Pods actually uses, because what's important is how much packaging per consumer use. It uses way less packaging because the product is more concentrated. But you can never sell that concentrated product without a new product format and a new packaging experience to bring that to life, because consumers just wouldn't get it.
And why? Because of the sustainability aspect with the Tide Pods, why not just get rid of the liquid detergent just altogether? Well, is it because people are so hard stuck on the one idea to transition would be tough?
P&G's going to now. So if you look at P&G's latest laundry innovation, it's exactly that. So you can see they had a brand called EC30 for a while. I think now it's called Tide. It's not Tide Sheets. Tide Next or something like that. I don't know. You can Google it. So that's what they're exploring. Now there are trade-offs, technical trade-offs, if you're dealing with a liquid format versus a sheet versus a powder. In terms of, does it dissolve? Can you put the same kind of chemistry into it? I think the future is actually getting out of liquids, because there's a lot of advantages to solid formats, but it's kind of back to the future, back to where the old school powder detergents that some people still use, but hardly anybody does.
Interesting. And why is it so much less packaging to use the pods than the detergent itself? Is it just because you can put more into like a single package, ship it off, less trucks, all that stuff?
Yeah, because if you think about it, it doesn't really matter how many ounces or liter of product is in a bottle. What matters is how many loads of laundry I can get out of that bottle. That's what determines your sustainability. So if I sell you a bottle that's a little bit heavier, but it has 5 times the amount of detergent in it, you're using a lot less plastic, a lot less packaging per load, because you won't buy that bottle as all. And so because it's more concentrated, you're using less packaging material, less trucks on the road, less gas to power those trucks. And it just kind of continues on and on and on, and you end up with a real sustainability win. Now that's one example. The other thing about sustainability is in packaging is the stuff that I'm working on now. So the aerosol product, and that's kind of a different story entirely, because that gets from recyclability, but also into global warming prevention, which is really important.
And did you start this product right after you left P&G, or?
Yeah, so when I left P&G, I connected with I retired as a senior director at P&G. I've been leading sustainability. I had a group on new product development. I developed and launched a whole bunch of products. And I connected through my network with a guy that was trying to obsolete the aerosol industry, because the aerosol industry is huge. It's like $60 billion in sales a year around.
60 billion? Holy cow. And like, what kind of products are these aerosols? Like, I can think of hairspray and all that stuff, but
yeah, that's good. So like hairspray, air fresheners, disinfectant sprays like Lysol, sunscreens, insect repellents like Deep Woods Off. So,
totally.
They're all over the place, and aerosols they're kind of a crazy packaging format, because if you think about it, it's pressurized can full of sometimes dangerous propellant, sometimes just compressed air, compressed nitrogen.
Yeah.
Who would want to have a pressurized scuba tank full of flammable gas and then ship it all around the world? It's amazing that the industry is able to do it, and they are very successfully able to do that. But there's a lot of effort that goes into making it absolutely safe. And our technology works without propellant. So, this is audio only, so people can't see, but it's just a bottle, and then it's a mechanical mechanism. So I twist the top, and then now I can spray. And it's using a mechanical spring piston arrangement in there, but it's not using any propellant. It's not using any pressure, so you don't have to have a super strong container to withstand the pressure. You can use more sustainable materials. And so, like, this technology, one of the reasons I'm excited about it is this is up to 90% less CO2. So up to 90% less.
Holy cow!
Warming using this versus a traditional aerosol.
And is it because that propellant?
It's partly because the propellant. It's partly because we don't have to use a metal can. We can use a recyclable plastic bottle. Metal produces a lot of carbon dioxide as it's produced. But also because, like the head, you can reuse this. So when the bottle's empty, you can put it in your recycling bin and put the head onto a new bottle. It kind of changes all the assumptions, all those inherent assumptions that industry has about what you must do. Because consumers demand aerosols. So the industry's like, well, I got to have this pressurized pack. I got to have these propellants. I got to have this. I got to have that. And we've been able to solve that. So we're working to get it into the marketplace. You can't buy it right yet, but I'm working with most of the major big companies, and hopefully in the next couple of years you'll see that.
And how did you get this idea? Because obviously this is totally different than sustainable packaging in terms of what you did at P&G.
Yeah. So I didn't actually come up with the idea. There was an inventor, a guy in his 80s that had invented this, and he had spent his whole career in packaging, developing systems. And he was always bothered by the fact that aerosols are great, but they're for the consumer, but they're terrible for all kinds of other reasons. They're complicated, dangerous, or can be dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so he had come up with the idea, and he had when I joined the company, they had a version, a much larger version, and this larger version let you try it, but it didn't really work. So, but like it would work, but it would break after a little bit. And it wasn't reliable. And again, like you want to sell hundreds of millions of units at this time. So that's why I had joined, because I had the experience through P&G. I mean, I launched a lot of new products at P&G, being able to take good ideas and de-risking them, debugging them, making them efficient to manufacture so that they're not wasteful, they're affordable, they don't break, all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why, I've been doing this I left P&G 6 years ago now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Almost 7 years ago,
Crazy.
which is hard to believe that it's been that long. But I'm having so much fun doing this, and what we're doing is really meaningful. It's going to make a really big impact, big impact on the planet. The company very successful, consumers like it, so everybody wins.
Yeah, how did you get into the design mindset? Because it seems like you love being on the design side of things, whether that was at P&G, even now with your aerosol products. When did you know you had a love for that? Like, obviously, I know chemical engineering, you work in CAD all the time. How did you kind of just know?
Well, I'm just laughing because I was the last class at NC State that did technical drawing with a pen and pencil, and the next started CAD. I do use CAD now. So for me, I mean, I'm not like the best technical designer. I'm not, the best materials expert. I'm an integrator. So what I've learned is to take experts in different disciplines to create amazing products. But, in terms of how I knew that I like to do this kind of stuff, I can remember being a kid and it's like 8 or 9 years old. And I was so excited every time like a TV broke or an appliance broke because my parents would let me take it apart and like just try to figure it out. My grandfather he was an engineer, worked at a construction company, and he built furniture in his spare time. And we were always building stuff. And he was the kind of guy like we were making a sling that you like throw rocks with, a slingshot. And we had to punch a piece of leather in this a hole in this little piece of leather to be able to string it up. And he had plenty of punches and everything like that, but instead we took his like 22 out back and shot a coffee can to get the shell case and use that. And I was like, this is so cool. But I just grew up, like quite a few people in my generation surrounded by like, especially my grandfather and my dad to a large degree too, didn't really know how to do stuff, but knew how to figure things out.
Yeah.
And I really love doing that. And that's what drew me to engineering. I don't think chemical engineering was a good choice. I think it would have been a better mechanical engineer. But it's that problem solving that's attracted me. And that's been the theme throughout my career, is solving pretty complicated, hard to define problems. Much more than packaging. So
yeah, like it seems a theme in people that I've talked to where a lot of their experiences have helped shape them to where they're supposed to be. Yeah. Whether that's, you build the technical skills or even the programming design skills in their early career, whether that's taking on internships or working in college, and they may not start in that avenue, but they always seem to get where they want to be. Yeah. And I've asked this question to a few people, and I was wondering for you, do you believe that things happen for a reason? Like you had chemical engineering, that background, and even the paper science and the internships experiences to kind of get where you are today.
Yeah. I wouldn't say things happen for a reason, but I do think like where I've gotten today is, one is I am intelligent. Okay. I'm a smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
I have been intentional about like seeking, figuring out like what experiences I like, and I've gotten lucky, and I think that all three of those come into play. There's plenty of smart people that work really hard and are intentional that just get bad breaks. Just a couple of people that are really smart that do really well. but an example is when I left B, and it was really hard for me actually. I'd been there 25 years, and I got caught in a corporate downsize. And I was like, holy crap, I just got my job. What am I going to do? I had just moved back from China with the family, and I was pretty pissed off because I wouldn't have relocated back to Cincinnati. And I called my one of my old bosses, who had always been kind of a mentor to me, and I said, hey, you know everybody. Like, if you have any suggestions, like who should I talk to? Who's hiring? Any jobs that are out there. And he was actually starting to work with this investor on this innovation company, APS, that I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was intention. I didn't just sit around and wonder what's going to happen. I started saying, who do I know in my network? And started calling and talking to people. But sheer luck that, my friend was just starting this company with this investor, and he's no longer part of the company. He's moved on to other things. I'm having a great time. I'm having the best time I've had my entire career.
Really?
So like
wow.
getting my job cut was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I wouldn't have had the courage to break and try something totally different and more entrepreneurial, but I was kind of forced to.
Yes.
And but I'm just it's kind of like I always tell people, people ask how I've gotten to where I am today. It's like constantly kind of like trying to think about, based on everything I've done, what am I really enjoying doing? What's like, what's the type of thing, and try to follow that thread. Like you actually said something a minute ago of people ending up doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's the thing, but you don't know what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So you just have to kind of take it a step at a time and say, okay, well, I just had that experience. Do I want more of that, or do I want less of that? And that'll tell you about where you go next.
Well, it's funny you say that, because it was a total blessing in disguise for yourself to be closed off from P&G.
Absolutely,
I mean, especially when you dedicated most of your career and life there, like you said, 25 years. And you said you were in China for that aspect?
Well, so I was in China for 6 years and Belgium for 5 years, and then the
Holy
US
cow.
for 11 years. Sorry.
And that was just them relocating you? Or?
It was them relocating, but it was also me really pushing for it.
Gotcha.
The normal, I mean, sometimes people's careers take them where they have to do that, but for me, that was a real goal and objective. Partly because I had this international internships, and my wife is a linguist. She speaks 8 languages, so she was really
unreal. That's just unreal.
She was really pushing for it, and I always felt those experiences taught me things that I didn't expect to learn. They taught me facts about other cultures, but also just about resilience, just how to manage difficult situations. Living in China was exciting, but I tell people every day it was fascinating and horrible in the same day. Every day. And overall, it was great. I'm glad I did it. But God, when we moved back, I was like, wow, life is so much easier here.
Oh, I'm sure. And because I've had friends that studied abroad, whether that's in Sweden or they go to Belgium or whatnot, and they always talk about how sustainably active, because I'm in the College of Natural Resources, and so they talk about the sustainability in Sweden in terms of like their natural landscapes and how they incorporate it with their daily lives.
Yeah.
So were you gaining that perspective as well each time you did travel to bring back when you did come back to the States, give you a better perspective on things?
Well, it's getting. I mean, I've always been an environmentalist since I was a kid. The story I always tell when I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and our backyard backed onto a giant state park. So I had like 300-acre backyard, basically. So I grew up as a kid, like going back and hiking and wandering in streams and stuff like this. And there was one place we always used to go, called it Frog City. Because you go there in the spring, and there was like 10,000 frogs croaking away. It was so cool. You had to like hike back on this tiny trail, and it was always magical. And I can remember I was like 8 or 9. I hiked back there one day with my friends. There was no frog sounds. I mean, this sounds like a made-for-TV movie. And I got back there, and somebody had dumped a bunch of 55-gallon drums of some kind of waste there, and everything was dead.
Jeez.
And I can remember this. I mean, it's like a made-for-TV movie.
Yeah.
And it really really impacted me. But I've always been an environmentalist, but throughout my career, and especially living in other countries, you see when people take different assumptions about what's possible and not possible, that you find out there's lots of ways to succeed. There's no conflict with businesses growing successfully and sustainability. There's no conflict between quality of life and taking care of the planet, between wealth generation and sustainability. There's really no conflict there. What there is people that aren't willing to solve the hard problems to be able to keep their cake and eat it too. And you really.
And I had a similar calling like that. When you talk about the trail of frogs, I wanted to get into one more question later on, is me and my brother, we took a trip to Colorado with my family, and it just so happened that there was a fly fishing event where you would go up into the mountains, someone would pick you up from our hotel, bring you up into the mountains. You're about 6,000 feet in the air, and elevation, and there's no motor boats allowed on the pond.
Yeah.
And so we were fishing pretty much all day, and we were rowing. We had sandwiches. It rained, snowed, was sunny, and all that within 6 hours. And I knew then, I was like, I would love to hold on to these landscapes and keep them non-polluted.
Great, right? I mean, it's like you get in those, and that's the other thing too, is like, I think people are unjustly afraid of nature. Like, you get in those kinds of things, and you know, people are like, oh my God, did you get wet? You're like, yeah, I got wet.
Well, I'll say I'm terrified of bees, so I'm more than happy to be inside sometimes in the summer. But it like brings the question of, are you seeing, as sustainability gets more and more promoted, are you finding more people being able or having that calling to take on those problems? And if more people are taking on those problems, are you finding it increasingly more difficult to get them done because everyone has input onto that idea?
I'm actually finding it easier to get it done more.
Yeah.
And I see this both from when I was at P&G. I'd started a consulting company after I left P&G as well, and also the current startup. So I'm working with most of the big companies. You go to the grocery store and you buy products. Most of those companies I'm working with some way. What's happened is, at first people go through this evolution of sustainability. They think, first of all, it's about avoiding risk. You know, hey, I better not dump poison into the river because I might get sued. Right? And then they realize it's about cost. They're like, hey, if I'm not dumping that stuff in the river, then you know, if I don't generate waste in the first place, then you know, I'm not throwing stuff away, so I spend less money. That's good. And then they start learning about, hey, it's about building successful products and brands and businesses. I mean, Pods is a great example there. It's more sustainable. Love it. It's more. And then, you know, they get to the point that they kind of like just take it as gospel. Unilever is a great example. So they make like Axe and Dove and like, you know, they made a decision quite a while ago that they said, you know what, we serve the world's consumers. The world is impacted by global warming and sustainability harm. And if people are worried about their house getting washed away, they're not going to be happily at home washing their clothes or using deodorant or whatever. So we better take care of the planet so that people are in a good space and they can buy products. And what I found is, over time, companies have seen more success stories where people have had commercial success while being more sustainable and not having to choose. Because it's not just about, as I said, it's not just about selling to green consumers. It's about more than that. It's about reducing waste, right? It's about generating. It's about, you know, companies that are sustainable get better talent. You know, they get smarter people want to go work for them, so they can do better things. And I think as you get more and more success stories like that, then it becomes easier to do it. It's not easy. It's still not easy.
I'm sure.
But I definitely do see that trend, and I'm hoping it's going to continue.
Well, and you think about how hard it is to change something that everybody already knows now to something different.
Yeah.
I mean, you even talk about AI. I know it's not necessarily a sustainability aspect, but AI is changing the way people do things. And there could be autonomous driving at one point in the future.
Yeah.
So to have people put their hands into AI and driving them to a different location, it's just totally different. You talk about the sustainability aspect, and even just to go back to the Tide Pods, like people like what is normal.
Yeah, no, for
There,
sure.
it is very difficult to create change,
Yeah,
and so I
it's
was,
very hard. Yeah.
yeah, and I was wondering how with APS or your company Alternative Packaging Solutions, how are you guys continuing to grow and develop your business to be able to have more people go in that sustainable route?
Well, that's the crux of us, right? So, because for this aerosol package, this is different. Okay,
Mm.
to use it, you have to twist the top. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, and you can spray for quite a long while, like for hairspray or whatever. But after a while, it stops spraying, and then you have to twist it again, and then you can spray some more. So it is changing people's habits. We found in our consumer research, it's not a difficult change. It's not a difficult thing to do, but people have to change what they're doing. And
Yeah.
despite all the benefits that we have, you know, we're in the sales process right now. You know, trying to get companies to launch this. It's hard because people are afraid. You know, consumers don't like change. The way you get around that, and what we're working and trying to bring to life, is you can't just give people a more sustainable option. You always have to give them something better.
Yeah.
So, like, this is better because a whole lot of reasons. I mean, there's the sustainability, but there's also, you know, you can have refills, so the consumer can get a refill cheap. It's not pressurized, so you can, it doesn't have to be a cylinder. It could be whatever, the shape of your Pantene. Things like this. The spray that I get out of this is very uniform and even. So if I'm spraying sunscreen on myself, I don't have to spread it around as much to get even coverage. So I should get better tanning or better cleaning. So you always have to give people something better that is inherently sustainable. So like Tide Pods, people buy Tide Pods because it's easy. It's easier and it's less mess to people that buy it. That's the big reason why they buy it versus a liquid laundry detergent that you have before. They don't buy it because it's sustainable. They buy it because of that. Sustainability kind of, you know, you can learn it's sustainable. It's not like a dark secret. But that's not the selling point. And that is the key. And that's the challenge that companies have to get to. Like as I think about autonomous cars, as I think about electric cars and vehicles, think about my twistness, right? It's about making those added benefits so compelling that people want to do them, and sustainability comes as an added bonus.
Oh, I'm sure. And are you also seeing the cost competitiveness with it? Because I feel like that would be another insanely important aspect, because if someone sees a more expensive product and they have no knowledge that it's reusable, they're probably just casting it to the side.
Yeah, no, for sure. To make a difference on the planet, you have to make products that everybody's going to want. So it's easy to make a premium product that's more sustainable that a small number of people want and will buy. But then that doesn't have as big an impact on the planet. If you want to have a big impact on the planet, you have to change what everybody does. And cost is a very important part of that. And there's two ways there. One is you have to be smart about how to innovate, create products that people, the key is not as much cost. The key is that people look at what they're getting and they say, that's a really good value. I'm glad I spent that money. You know, think about going like for the a decent meal versus like a really, really cheap crappy meal. Like a gas station hot dog that's been like spinning on that cooker for like the last like 4 days. It might be cheap, but you know, you're probably happy to go eat at Chipotle instead of eat that, even though you're going to spend more money. Right? So and that's why like you either have to be the same cost if you're replacing something identical, or you have to give something. If you're more expensive, you have to give something better. The other way it plays out, though, is non-sustainable options are becoming more and more expensive because of regulations. That's the thing that governments are doing. So it's very common in Europe. There's eco taxes in packaging. So if your packaging is not sustainable, the company has to pay a tax, and they pass that on to the consumer in the price. And they're starting to come in the U.S. So California, Washington, New Jersey, Maine, several states are starting to pass that type of legislation as well.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to, it's like, the problem is it's short and long-term costs. Like, we all know that non-sustainable things are more costly in the future, right? If global warming continues and we have, the hurricanes and tornadoes and climate change and all that kind of stuff that we see today, like, that impacts such a ridiculous amount of expense in terms of maintaining life. If you think about disaster relief, if you think about insurance companies, building companies, infrastructure, but that's long term, right? So the only way to tie that to the short term decisions that impact that are some of these eco taxes. And I believe that it's the right thing to do. And most people in industry believe it's the right thing to do.
And well, for yourself, you guys won an award on your packaging innovation, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So we won an award it was jointly sponsored by Walmart and also NGO, non-government organization, the U.S. Plastics Tax, that's really driving sustainability. And they had given us our award because we're bringing massive sustainability benefits and reusable packaging to a category, aerosols, that people always said that was impossible. So the aerosol industry was always saying, you can't have a refillable aerosol. It's too complicated. We have to have this pressure. That's something for other people to think about. That's something for laundry detergents to think about. There are innovations in aerosols with propellants and so forth to make them more sustainable. They don't have those ozone-destroying propellants anymore. But at the same time, there's implicit assumptions and what must be true that we've broken. So, I mean, I'll talk to people in industry and they'll say, well, you don't have an aerosol because it's not pressurized. I'll say, no, this is an aerosol because consumers tell me it's an aerosol. They push the button and the product stores out.
I mean, I think that's absolutely awesome to be able to win that award. And how much to you does it mean to win something like that? Because obviously, total life switch from P&G over to this, and you're having the absolute time of your life being able to design more to this product. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, well, it's tremendous, and it's tremendous for a couple reasons. Really, maybe it's just the same reason. It's easy when you're into like new technology development or new product development. It's easy to fool yourself that what you have is the most amazing thing possible. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of this throughout my career. I'll talk to my wife, and she'll say, "You're excited, but that's not really that exciting." And some she does say are really. So getting that third-party recognition is really important because it's big, very smart organizations looking at what we're doing and saying, "You guys are doing it right. You're changing."
Yeah.
It also means a lot for the business for the same reason. Because like if I go to a client and I say, "Hey, buy my technology because it's amazing," I'm biased. So they're going to look at it and they're going to say, "Is it really amazing?" But if they hear from credible parties like that, Fast Company magazine also gave us several awards recently.
That's awesome.
These are big, USPP, Walmart, Fast Company. We use a university in the UK to do our sustainability credentialing. So, and we do that intentionally so we can point out and say, look, these are unbiased people. They don't have skin in the game. They're going to tell the truth. They're not going to. I mean, I'm going to tell the truth too, but a lot of salespeople, a lot of innovators, they kind of steal the truth.
just a little bit. So. Yeah, I got you. Well, and it sounds like you've had such an amazing career and being able to get where you are today. How would you tell someone that's trying to figure things out, or what would you tell them to get where they want to be when they're older?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I tell them is if they have a vision of what they want to be, when they're older and they're getting ready to retire, that it's probably wrong. So don't stress about having a vision of where you want to go and all the steps worked out about how to get there. I think that's a really bad idea. I also think it's a bad idea to go randomly through life. Okay. So what I always tell people is think about, come up with a hypothesis. Okay. I'm an engineer. So come up with a hypothesis. Of what you think your career should be or what direction you want to go. And then find an experience or a job or something that lets you try that on. And then after you do that, ask yourself, okay, was that perfect? Probably not. But what did I like about that? And what did I not like about that? And then ask yourself, okay, what's my next step? Okay. So like I told you, I grew up, like, I love to take stuff apart. I love to build things. I was always building models. I love nature. I was back hiking in the woods. So I knew I wanted to do something that was like kind of solving problems, taking things apart, and technical and sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
That was my guiding principle, right? And as I've gone through my career, I've refined that as I've gone along the way. I realized I like solving complicated problems. I used to think it was complicated technical problems. I learned actually it's just complicated problems. You know, I spent several years in Beijing when I was there, helping all the different cultures we have in the tech center figure out how to interact without their cultural biases and preconceptions that kind of come up unconsciously. And people were a lot happier. They created much better results. I love that. It had nothing to do with technology. It had to do with human psychology. So that's what I always tell people. It's like, you know, yes, have a vision of where you think you want to go. Decide what's the next step you're going to try in that direction, and then reassess and plan on adjusting 80 times in your career.
I think that's absolutely awesome, because for me, I literally created a note sheet. I was like, okay, what am I good at?
Yeah.
Math. And I made it very general. Math.
Yeah.
Somewhat talking to people, technical skills. And eventually I got to where I want to be in terms of doing GIS. Now, that's the next step. Yeah. I will reassess when I get to that next step, right, and see if I really like it in the workforce. Mm-hmm. So right. I really,
no, exactly. But like, you know, if it's not the right next step, you still probably want to do something like math, you know, something that, you know, something. So like, as you do it, that's the other thing too, is that as I started my career and like choosing where to go, I started by thinking like, what job do I want to do? Mm-hmm. But then as I started doing different jobs, then I started asking myself, and it's not like I knew this to start with. This is what I figured out along the way. Then I started asking myself, let's forget about that job. Let's forget about I'm going to be an engineer, or I'm going to be a packaging person, be an innovator. Like, what's the theme or the undercurrent that connects to things that I like to do? And then you start seeking out more things with those themes. But yeah, what you described is exactly what you have to do. You think about, like, what do I like to do? What am I good at doing? What job do I think will be really good that combines those? And do it for a while, and then ask yourself, okay, do I want to keep doing more of this? Or now that I've done this, did I learn something else about myself? Did I find something else? I also always tell people, and I did not do a good job of this until later on. I did not build my network and just talk to people about what they're doing and why they're interested in it as much as I should have. Because when I you know, lost my job at P&G and I was still working there for a while, and I had a severance package and all this, I really started, I was like, oh my God, I gotta, like, okay, let me go talk to all my friends out in the industry and see what's going on. And after a while, I realized I got a great network. I know a lot of people. And there's all these past people who have gone to success. And so I could kind of relax a little bit. I was like, okay, it's going to be okay. And I could have done that earlier in life, right? Because everybody's struggling with the same question.
Yep. It's all about, what do I want to do when I get older?
Yeah,
and what do I want to spend my life doing? And that's why I really like doing this, is because I get to talk about people who've been in their industry for periods of time, and they love what they're doing.
Yeah.
It may be stressful at some points, but to hear about the different perspectives that people have and to hear your story, I think it's absolutely awesome. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show today.
Happy to.
Thought it was great.
Well, that's great.
That was great.
It's been a fun conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Brad. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anytime.